You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. You're listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. This is another episode of the Coaching Success Series. I'm your host, Matt Reynolds. Happy Friday, everybody. This is going to be a short one, but I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. I'm getting ready to go to a wedding in Ohio for one of our amazing employees, and so I'm getting ready to leave town. So we're going to knock out a quick one today. I'm going to read just a short section of the book that's actually an exercise that we did. This is kind of one of those places in a book where they kind of gray box this section, and it's in the section of core values. And so I had done a previous episode just a couple months ago about defining your core values. One of the things that we've heard from people is that it's still a real struggle sometimes to define your core values, especially to try to distinguish yourself as different, as well as be truly authentic to who you are in your core values. And so we did an exercise years ago. Our team had met. We were actually up for a USSF, the national meet in Portland. And so we rented a big Airbnb outside of Portland and put the whole team in it. And we spent several days working together, and it was fantastic. And this is how we really came up with our core tenets and our core values for the company. And so I want to share that with you in case it's a struggle for you as you think through defining the attributes that really matter to you and the core values that define who you are and maybe what your business is or how you run your family or whatever that thing is. So there's a great exercise that was incredibly helpful for us. And this is what it looked like. The subtitle of this is Struggling to Come Up with Core Values. Years ago, I gathered the entire leadership team of our company in Portland for an intensive series of work sessions with the goal of setting overarching 5-year objectives for the company, which would then guide our annual, monthly, and daily actions for the foreseeable future. This was a massive undertaking, and that it had to take place in very little time due to the circumstances of bringing a team together that is spread out all over the country. We were, of course, in the area, as I mentioned, because Barbell Logic was the title sponsor for the USSF, big national powerlifting competition. Using that opportunity, rather than booking each person on my leadership team their own hotel room, we booked a big, beautiful home with 7 or 8 bedrooms in a rural suburb outside the city, surrounded by the beautiful Oregon forest. It was perfect. There were giant pine trees everywhere. It was in the woods. It was gorgeous. We did not have days of thoughtful reflection at our disposal. We had mere hours. It was important, I felt, to begin that process with the same process previously spoken about previously in the book and also previously in the core values, defining your core values episode on the Barbell Logic podcast of defining our core values. How are we actually going to do that? However, to expedite the process, we used a bottom-up method rather than top-down that you may find useful if you're stuck or struggling to come up with your core values. The process requires a lot of real, actual sticky notes. So you got to get a whole bunch of sticky notes, like probably a couple hundred, literally. And you've got to have ample wall space. So the nice thing about this house is it had a big living room in it, big open living room kitchen area, and lots of open walls. And we used the walls for this so that we could put the sticky notes on the walls. It worked like this. Over a time period of approximately 20 minutes, every member of the team would simultaneously write down one important action item on a sticky note as quickly as possible, and then another and another, until every important business action item that each member of the leadership team could come up with was written on a sticky note. Everything that would go in quadrants 3 or 4 of an Eisenhower matrix, right? So you're talking about all important things, all the important stuff, had its own note, whether urgent or not. So urgent and important or not urgent and important. Then we started putting the sticky notes on the wall in pattern groups. Any 2 or more items that seemed connected went together. Obviously, there was some overlap, right? Many of us would write the same thing. So like, okay, those can be combined. Once the groups were set, we labeled them. Then we sat back, literally all on the couches and the chairs, and looked around at the walls, right? And we looked at the groups, and as we saw, we could combine 2 or more. We did those with new headings. We did this until we had our 4 major tenets for the company: serve, grow, teach, and steward. And these became the 4 categories of our core values and continue to guide the company now 7 years later through our long-term goals, annual priorities, and major metrics for our success. So if you're feeling stuck at this step, get your sticky notes out and try this method. It's guaranteed to get you moving in the right direction and help identify and define your own personal core values. So I'll break away for just a second. So basically we just took every task that we did that we felt was important to the business, and we wrote one task on one sticky note and collected those. And then we started to put those on the wall based on category or based on similarity. And at first we would have 12, 13, 15 different categories. And you're like, well, actually these two categories could probably be combined into a major category. And we kept doing that until we refined down to 4 basic categories. Those 4 basic categories, again, were serve, grow, teach, and steward. And then we had the action items already written on the sticky notes that would actually serve those tenets. Would serve, or would serve, grow, or would serve, teach, or would serve, steward. Steward is both a combination of how we steward our people well and how we steward our capital well. And that is how we ended up with our 4 core values. Now, 4 major tenets. Your 4 tenets or 5 tenets or 3 or whatever, they're not going to be the same as ours. That's okay, right? This is what makes you unique. It needed to be authentically us. We weren't trying to just think about who we just wanted to become in some ethereal sort of way. It was like, what were we actually doing that we felt like was important? And also, we've talked through this in other podcasts. There are actions that you do that you feel like aren't important. They're urgent sometimes and not important. And those don't go on sticky notes. It's just the important stuff. It's the important action items that you do on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month basis. And that starts to define, you'll start to see really pattern recognition. You combine the patterns, you put the things that are similar into a section, and you continue to distill that down until you have primary core values. And that's the bottom-up method rather than the top-down. So rather than just in the previous episode where I talked about defining your core values, it was a very top-down. Like you think about your attributes, things that are very important to you, personal responsibility and taking initiative and things that we talked about, things like that. And you work down until you get to your core values. This is a way if you're stuck and you're like, I haven't really ever thought deeply about those things, that you can actually start with the actions at the bottom that you're doing on a day-to-day basis and work your way up. And so we actually had a similar exercise to this last night. My family, I won't go into the details, just talking through teenagers and trying to train them well. We walked through the Eisenhower matrix, and my wife has the little whiteboards that are 8.5 by 11 or 10 by 12 or whatever. Had them make the 4 quadrants and had them write the things in their life that are not urgent, not important, the things that are urgent, not important, the things that are urgent and important, and the things that are not urgent but important and usually the most important. And I didn't make them share all those things. I wanted to let them have privacy to that. I let them share what they wanted. And then I had them take a picture of it for their own phone so that they knew where to go. That's another great starting point to figure out when you start to look at what's really important to me, as well as what is urgent and important, and you can distill from there. So these are a couple great exercises that you can use if you're stuck and really defining, because you've heard Simon Sinek, I think is his name, like, what's your why? That's become kind of a trite saying. This is probably the only time I'll ever say that on this podcast. But to really understand why you do what you do, you have to understand your core values. In order to build things like the game plan, you have to understand your core values. It can't just be about actions. It has to start with the core values and the major tenets and the annual priorities or goals or objectives or whatever you want to call them, and you work down to the actions. But if you're struggling to come up with the start of the list of the core values, you can actually go backwards and start with the actions and work your way back up. And so we did that. It worked great. And then we were able to take that as a leadership team and go back down through there and start to put everything in the right order. So, okay, these are the actions that matter most. There's a hierarchy of actions. There's a hierarchy of goals and priorities. You can start to build that out. We've talked all through that in the game plan episodes. There's a handful of those in previous podcasts, but it was incredibly helpful for us. Sometimes you just have to get your nose out of the computer and actually write stuff down. And so those sticky notes were tremendously helpful for us. There is another book on writing business plans called Business Model Generation that uses something very similar for how to write a business plan. And it's sticky notes and a giant whiteboard, and you start using sticky notes to do that. So that's been incredibly effective for us. And we've only had to do it a handful of times in the last nearly decade that we've been in business, but it's a great way to start if you're just stuck somewhere. So it's a great time to use a pomodoro or two totally wipe out distractions. Get in the biggest room in your house. It's got wall space that you can stick stuff on the wall, which is probably a bedroom, honestly, because there's probably not as much decor and stuff as in your living room. Or a dining room is another good one. And just start writing on the sticky notes. If you have a team, make sure the whole team is there, or at least all the leadership team is there, or anybody that would have ownership of the major metrics or KPIs in the business, and work on that together. Figure out how to distill that down and come up with your core values. And then you've got the top piece, and you can go back down through it and create the bridge between the core values and the important actions. There you go. There's another episode of the Coaching Success Series. I would be remiss if I did not promote the book a little bit, Undoing Urgency. This came out of the Undoing Urgency. Saw the final draft, number 1 from Forbes. It's fantastic. And we're working through it and making really tiny, minor changes, grammatical changes, or a word here, a word there, making sure the graphics all look really good, but actually seeing their full layout from the Galley team. They did a great job. The dust cover looks awesome. Super excited about the book. It should be up for pre-sale soon on Amazon. We'll, of course, keep you updated. But the best way to be updated is to go to my personal website, which is ryanmattreynolds.com, ryanmattreynolds.com. And you just sign up for newsletter updates. I send very few of those. I'm not going to spam your email. If there's not a legit update about the book, we're not going to send emails. We're not going to try to sell the books through it. None of that stuff. When it comes time to launch the book, we're going to say, like, go to Amazon, buy the book, right? And a lot of that is because we would like the book to rank well. And if we buy 5,000 books or 10,000 books and we try to sell them ourselves, we probably could, and we could probably make more money doing that, but it doesn't help with the rankings. And so the rankings are kind of everything to make bestseller lists and whatnot. So if that's a possibility for us, we want to push our chips in the middle of the table there. But you can get real-time updates on the book by going to ryanmattreynolds.com, putting in your email address. Again, I'm not going to spam your email. Certainly never share your email with anybody else. And get updates on the book. And I would be super honored if you buy the book. All the feedback has continued to be fantastic, and I'm super excited about it and proud of the book and proud of the team that put it together. So that's another episode of the Coaching Success Series. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll be in Ohio for the next 3 days. I'm excited. It's a quick turnaround. It's, flying out on Friday, wedding on Saturday, flying home on Sunday, and back to work on Monday. But I'm super excited about it. And so I'll see you guys next Friday.